I'm so thrilled to now be able to share with you from the author's mouth, the playwright of Do Lord, Remember Me, Jongh, who's going to talk about, his early start with this production and what it's like to bring it back now, so many years later. So tell us about, first, why you chose to write this play.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. I'm glad to be here, Joan.
Thank you.
Do Lord was my second play. My first play was Hail, Hail the Gangs, which had an urban setting. And I wanted to go in a completely different direction for the second play. And looking for ideas, I remembered a book I had heard about called The Negro in Virginia, because I knew that there were a series of interviews with former slaves that had been done in the 1930s, and a few of them had been published in this book called The Negro in Virginia. I began to do investigations in that area, and when I began to look at the actual interviews themselves, the idea of using them as background for a play changed. Many of them were quite eloquent, were quite moving, were quite touching, and some of them were in really the voices of the people themselves. In other words, the interviewers had actually recorded word for word rather than simply summarizing the content of what they said. And those words were striking. And so the task changed. I no longer wanted to create a fiction based on these interviews. I wanted to expose the interviews themselves to the public. And so the task of Do Lord was to shape an evening in theater that would reveal these voices in their own language, in their own terms, with their own personal expressiveness. And that's how Do Lord came about.
And these were actually slave narratives was that from the 1930s?
They were done in the 1930s. These were basically very old people, by and large, who had been mostly children in the last years of slavery. So they had experienced slavery as children. So in many of them, there's a kind of child's point of view. And one of the interesting things about this was that people brought their kids to see Do Lord, which surprised me because it's very adult, grown-up material. And I realized it's because of this childlike, or the memories of the old people, but they're remembering their lives as children. And so it speaks very directly not only to adults, it speaks also to children. And so one of the things that amazed me, and so it was a multi-generational audience that was gathered, that would come together to see the play. And so the entire idea of the play was to bring the voices to life. And I was very fortunate with my actors. My actors were great storytellers. And so they could immerse themselves in the lives of the people who were being interviewed. And I tried to shape it into a dramatic evening.
I can't wait to see it because I hadn't seen it before, but read so many basically rave reviews. I am really looking forward to seeing it. And so how did you obtain these stories?
There's an enormous body of slave narratives. These were done by the Work Progress Administration and the Roosevelt administration. And they were done in every state of the union with government funds. These interviews were done in every single state of the union, and they were compiled. I use mostly the ones from Virginia. And that turned out to be a good choice for me and for the play, because they're all focused around a small area, a tight geographic area around the James River. And this is where Nat Turner's rebellion takes place. And
wow.
So I was able to then bring Nat Turner into the story as a focal point.
What did you gain from doing this research that you didn't expect?
In a way, Do Lord Remember Me is probably the most important thing I've achieved in life. Because of the way I felt I was almost a medium for these people. I'm not a very religious or spiritual kind of person. So mediums and that kind of thing are not my bag particularly. But somehow I felt I had a task, and the task had found me, and that Do Lord was a product of my coming to terms with that task and meeting it with the cooperation of Woody, of Reggie Life, of a brilliant group of actors, built generously around Glenn Turman, who came. Somebody gave me his address. I wrote him a letter. Some other people must have spoken to him as well. But when I called him, I described the task, and he just said, "Okay." And it was amazing. I thought I was going to have to do a whole sales job to get him to agree to be in the play initially. And, I was a fan. I had seen him in Cooley High and other movies. And so, that he was just so willing and so generous to step in and be part of, my project was very gratifying.
Yes, he's very accessible and, humble. I've had him on my show numerous times when he's working in New York. We would have him on because we also, as most of our viewers, I'm sure, are big fans of him in Cooley High. I don't know if you had a chance to talk with the actors at all.
This time around, in this world of pandemic and Zoom, I've had very little to do with this actual production. So I am looking forward to seeing it on Friday, just like everyone else.
Exactly. Thank you for joining Inside New York for our special behind-the-scenes look at the New Federal Theater's presentation of Do Lord Remember Me. And you can watch more of our interview with the producer, the playwright, director, and cast on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll be the first to receive an alert as soon as it's available on demand. And you can always watch Inside New York every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. on MNN TV. We'll see you then.